Good evening. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you guys about the Ohio Grassman, their version of Bigfoot. I did a cryptid profile on it a while back and discussed a lot of different points on what it is, but I wanted to go in a little more backstory. Plus, a friend of the channel, Wolfgang, sent me some absolutely amazing Ohio Grassman art. This is based off depictions of his eyewitnesses that he had painted up, and a lot of the images. There's a few images in here that aren't his, but a lot of these are. And he was kind enough to let me use them. So thanks, Wolfgang. Really appreciate it. And Ohio, as you can see, being the Midwest, pretty much about as Midwest as you can get before you're east, and where it really dips down from Canada and the Great Lakes area, you really get a lot of crossover from the different types of Sasquatch. And you also have a lot of sightings from Ohio. You get into Bigfoot, you hear about the Pacific Northwest, and you hear about the skunk ape and the Mogollon monster, and all through Montana and the Sierras. And then you hear about Ohio, and you're quite surprised that Ohio, all through that region, has a lot of sightings, a lot of Bigfoot encounters. Now, here's the BFRO website. As you can see, all the different counties there. Now, my experience is most of the counties that have no sightings with them, or maybe one, are a little more populated, and the ones that tend to have a lot of sightings are ones that are a lot more heavily wooded, obviously. But this is a great place to start. I mean, it's by no means all-inclusive because people have sightings all the time, and they're not always reporting them to the BFRO. I've had several sightings, and I never reported them to BFRO. But they've also had a few more updated reports. They have some Class A, some Class B, some Class C. Basically, the Class A reports are eyewitness. They saw the actual creature. Class B is they heard howls, they saw footprints, they heard tree knocks. And Class C is third-hand or second-hand knowledge of someone told me they saw something, kind of a thing. So that's basically their classification system. The BFRO, like I said, is a good place to start when researching an area or a region. So Ohio, in a lot of areas, being they get a lot of snow, they get a lot of rain, they get very hot summer months and very cold winter months. They get a lot of moisture. So there's a lot of depictions of the Grassman, their versions of Bigfoot, being depicted around water. So you see in a lot of these awesome paintings here that they're depicted around lakes, going through tents and campgrounds. And I think that's very important why there is a lot of sightings there. Is I think it's just really good habitat for Bigfoot and other cryptid creatures. Is you got a lot of water, you've got a lot of deer, you've got a lot of other wildlife there for them to live off of. You have large population centers because we know Bigfoot likes to steal trash sometimes and steal chickens and livestock, among other things. And being close to Canada, they have a lot of migration that they can go through and a lot of areas that they can move around. They can move higher and lower like they do in climates like we've talked about in the past. And the other interesting part is that there's your standard Bigfoots like we've talked about, the type 1s, the big patty types, and the type 2s. And then you have the more rare like the Gugwe type with the protruding snout. And even on the more East Coast, the more Neanderthal-looking ones, you get a big cross-section of what people are seeing out there. There seems to be a lot of cryptid activity. I know Loveland, Ohio with the Loveland frog, and dogman sightings all along the Mississippi and Missouri basins in the Midwest there. You get a lot of sightings of a lot of different stuff. I just think that there's just so many sections of uninterrupted woods and long stretches of it and interconnecting waterways. And I just think it's really fascinating that everybody associates Bigfoot with the Pacific Northwest. But if you really want a good chance of experiencing something, Ohio is not to be missed. And I really like this particular picture of the panther, either be a black mountain lion or something else staring up at the Grassman, because in Ohio there's been a lot of reports of mountain lions and a lot of reports that the officials refuse to recognize it. I know that's been something that's been going on. They wander over, there's a population, but if they acknowledged that they were there, then they would have to protect them. And I think it's kind of ironic when it pertains to Bigfoot. And, being Ohio, it does get a lot of snow, so I think this is a great depiction. I think these things are pretty cold tolerant. I think when it gets really cold, though, and deer start moving and the other ungulate species and other things start moving out of the snow, I think these would too. But much like bears that can delay hibernation if they have food sources, there's even reports of bears following wolves around who never hibernated because they were getting enough food. I think if they're near population centers and farms and other things that they can get a steady food supply from, stealing or whatever, I think that maybe this would delay them in moving to lower and slightly warmer climates. So I think that's always a factor to think about with these things. I think they are very cold tolerant, and I think there are other subspecies of these things, like the Windigo subspecies that is purely carnivorous, that really likes the snow, that seems to be a little bit more independent, a little bit more of a solitary type creature. And when you talk about Ohio Grassman, to me, it's not only are you talking about your normal Bigfoots that people see all the time, your type 1s, the big patty looking types, and you have maybe some type 2s that look a little more chimpanzee, a little more wood boogery types, the kind of standard ones. I think in this area you get a lot of blend of that, but you also get a lot of other cryptid stuff and other spin-offs of different types of Bigfoots, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So for me, it's just absolutely astounding how much reports come out of there, and a lot of like roadside crossings, being that people travel in cars a lot and have to go to the next town and next areas, especially a little more rural environments. People like me who live in the city are used to the next city being the next one over, but when you're out in the country, you're visiting, especially when I was in Alaska, you got to drive a long way just to get to the next town, and there's a lot of nothing between them. And like a lot of areas, when you have woods and hunting and everything else, you have a lot of campers. A lot of campers report being in contact with the Grassman and these other Bigfoot species. So I think that's really common, stealing coolers and whatnot. And that kind of leads me into one of the most famous things of Ohio is the Ohio Howl, that long, mournful howl. And we're going to give it a listen here. The Ohio Howl has often fascinated me. It's called the Ohio Howl because of this 1994 recording, but people have reported a very similar, long, mournful, deep howl all over the United States and across the nation, and even up into Canada and different parts where they've had Bigfoot reports. And it's always been quite fascinating to me, that real long howl. And if you ever watch Finding Bigfoot and a classic Bigfoot calling, they use a lot of that. I've heard things not quite like the Ohio Howl in California, but I've heard long howls and moans and things in the woods before, followed by yips. And you can hear coyotes. I've heard them before up at the property, where you can hear coyotes yipping, and then in the distance you hear some kind of a different howl that's deeper, bigger than a coyote, and we don't have wolves. So, yeah, I think it's a very, very fascinating phenomenon with the howls and calls that Bigfoot does, and the Ohio Howl, I think, is a great example of that. There's some people say that it's fake, and if it is, that's fine. It's still very creepy, in my opinion. One facet of the Ohio Grassman phenomenon is these small creatures that kind of resemble more like a human-sized, more like an ape, more like a monkey, but more human-sized, smaller, somewhere between like a human and a chimp, but not really big like a type 2, almost like a dark-skinned feral human in some ways gets reported. So this is one of the fascinating things, the Ohio Grassman. There's a few reports of these and people seeing these things along with the video. There's a famous video of something very dark-skinned and wild-looking digging in a graveyard, digging through a wood pile or a dirt pile. And there's lots of reports of these things, almost kind of like these wood-type people, 5-6 feet tall, dark-skinned but very primitive-looking, living in the trees and coming out, along with a lot of other stuff that gets spotted. The other subspecies that gets reported a lot, besides the big patty-type Bigfoots, is the Windigo-type species. Now, I know these are in Minnesota and in Canada, and Ohio's a little lower, but, these things move around, and being a little more solitary type creature. The purely carnivorous Windigo, where they have fangs and claws, but they're built like a patty type Bigfoot. People see these things, they say it had fangs, it had claws, it was very aggressive, quite scary, named after kind of the Wendigo species of Native American culture, with the demon, if you will, from Native American culture. Now that's something separate. People always say, oh, no, that's something different. Well, yeah, there's the Wendigo, the supernatural beast, and then there's the natural phenomenon of a carnivorous Bigfoot-like creature, a Yeti kind of like creature that likes snow and cold weather and has fangs and claws, and that's also called like a Wendigo. So that's what we're talking about here, and they have been seen in Ohio. So you got to consider that that's one type of thing that's also seen there. The other thing to consider its location in the country is that there's a lot of dogman sightings there as well in Ohio. You get, I'm not talking about the gugwe that we'll talk about in a second, the Bigfoot with the protruding snout, but this is like an upright canine with canine legs and real canine looking ears in the snout. Long legends of everything all through there, looking for, going from the Beast of Bray Road and all that kind of stuff. You get a lot of dogman reports. And along the Missouri and Mississippi basins, you also get reports of gugwees. These are a lot like a Wendigo Bigfoot, but they have a protruding snout, more like a baboon or a mandrill type snout. Also very carnivorous with long teeth, very aggressive, very mean, known to take out black bears. A little more solitary. You don't hear about them too often with big family groups, but gugwees are in fact scary. And there's also other things that lurk in the woods. This is more of the artwork. I know it's not a Bigfoot, but I had to throw it in there. But you also get UFO encounters and orbs of lights and other scary things going on in the woods. Ohio and that whole region, there's lots of stuff out there. It's very old woods, very storied woods, and it's truly fascinating to me. So I got some friends that live in the area. One of these days I'm going to have to go out and visit them. It's the guys over at You Had Me at Bigfoot podcast. We'll have to go tromp through Ohio and Kentucky and all those different areas and go look around in the woods and see if we can't find any of this stuff for ourselves. Anyway, so I wanted to talk to you guys about this and share some artwork. I've always thought it was fascinating. Thank you very much. Stay safe in the woods. If you could please, it would really help me out. Hit that like button, the thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've been going through a lot of stuff with YouTube lately and demonetization. I don't know if I'm a target for some reason, but YouTube's just not being as cooperative as they are. So I don't really know what's going on with that. But every like, every comment really helps the channel grow and really helps me gain support and traction. Thank you very much, folks.